Hey y'all, welcome to Sunday Night Live in a new location. It may be a little loud, so bear with me because I'm in actually a public place. But we're going to talk tonight about how to stay financially sustainable, even with political changes. Had, we're now preparing for a major political shift federally. So I want to talk about how to stay sustainable when things like that change. There's going to be a major shift. Just know that. But what does that mean for you as a nonprofit founder, and how do you stay consistent? So I'm going to talk about that tonight. And just give me a holler and let me know you can hear me okay. I'm actually in a hospital waiting room. So I I can't control what's behind me. But if there's any point where you can't hear me, just let me know. Mrs. Doubtfire is playing in the background. So if you hear Robin Williams, that's why, because it's on the TV in the background. So how about this? Y'all give me a holler. Let me know who you are, where you're from. Tell us about your nonprofit. Give us your mission, all the things that you do, because you never know who's watching. You never know who you can connect with in the chat. And you just need to get into the practice of talking about who you are and what you do. And people need to know. Like, you, every moment you should take the opportunity to share about what your nonprofit is and what your impact is. All right. So, guys, let me know in the chat if you can hear me okay. I'm going to wait and see. I'm on Wi Fi, so it may be a little shaky. So, I just want to check in with y'all to make sure that everything's okay and you can hear me okay, especially on Instagram. Can y'all hear me? Y'all good? Let me know in the comments. Also, Facebook and YouTube, give me a holler and let me know. There might be a big delay. And so I'll keep talking until I hear from folks, but I just want to make sure you can hear me okay. I want to make sure that I still go live. Oh, hey, Kim. Good. I want to make sure I still go live despite, things that are going on, things that are happening. And I do have a place here in the waiting room to do it. So, hey, we're going to go live. I'm just not at my house and I just don't have my sound effects. I feel a little naked, but that's all right. We're going to make it. I'm going to make my own sound effects. All right, y'all. So there we go. I see y'all. Hey, Gerard in Toronto. First time catching me live. That's awesome. Hey, Shoshana in Uganda. Yeah, y'all. We worldwide. We international. We got Canada in the building. We got Uganda in the building. Look at that. All right. So now that I have confirmed that you guys can hear me okay, I'm going to go ahead and go forward. So this is what we're going to talk about. So why are you in the waiting room? A family member is in the hospital. She's been in the hospital for a week, and I'm here with her, just sitting with her. I've been here for a couple days now. So please pray for her and her heart. So, and thank you for any prayers and any concerns and things like that. So, this is what we're going to talk about today. How do you become financially sustainable when the world around you begins to shift? And the world around you can shift in multiple ways. Sorry, y'all. It's a hospital. So I'm gonna just keep talking just in case. So how do you keep going when the world is shifting around you? And the world around you can shift in multiple ways. For the United States, it has shifted politically, and the change is coming soon. But it's not just politically. The things in your local community can shift, the things in your life can shift, all those things can shift. So, how do you maintain your focus and how do you keep going for growing your nonprofit? That's what I'm going to talk about tonight. All right. So, if y'all with me, you all have questions about financial sustainability, please go ahead and hey, Dr. Salib. Okay, good. You can hear me. Please go ahead and drop them in the chat. But let's talk about it tonight, because I know that there's quite a few people, at least the people who follow me and in my community, who are worried right now, who are concerned about not just what it means just for our country, but just policy changes and shifts, which can really have an impact on how we do our work. It's just the reality of what it is. So I wanted to talk about it. So here are three things, or three ways or areas I want you to focus on to stay on your path to becoming financially sustainable. So this is the first thing I want y'all to do. This is the first thing we're going to talk about. Let's put the word accept in the chat. Accept. ACCEPT. So the first thing you got to understand is you have to accept that the environment around you will shift, and that it's not meant to be the same, and it's not meant to be what you want it to be. It's not meant to be favorable all the time, right? Or it's not meant for some of you all, it may not reflect the policies that you need or would want for your family or for your community. And the reality is that sometimes that is just what it is. It's not always going to be favorable for us, right? Or for our mission, or doesn't necessarily support the things that we want to do for our mission. It can and it cannot. You never know, because we all have a different focus in the work that we're doing. But this is what I want you to know, that things shift back and forth all the time. But what should never shift is your mission and the reason why you're doing this. You have to know for yourself, this is our mission, this is why we're doing this, and this is what we're focused on. Because this is what happens a lot of times when things change. People like to chase trends. And I notice this a lot in the social media world, because I do a lot on social media, that they tell you want to go viral, follow the trends, right? Do the things that everybody else is doing. Watch, that's what some gurus say. Do the things that other people are doing. So you may be tempted to say, oh, the trend is that, funding is going this way, or this kind of work is being funded. So let's lean into this. Perfect example with COVID. There was a lot of money flowing during COVID. And there was a lot of money flowing towards a certain kind of service to support people in a certain kind of way. But guess what? That money dried up. And if your whole focus was shifted to just chasing the money based on what was available during COVID, then you found yourself in a hard way when that money dried up. Because what? We have to accept that things will shift and things will not change. And though there was a horrible impact of what COVID did to us mentally, to us physically, health-wise, as a society, there were some positive things in terms of economic boost for people especially in the United States. But that didn't stay the same. That had to change, that had to shift. So one thing I need you to know is that there are things that are going to be happening around you that are going to change and shift. But what are the things you refuse to change and shift about your mission and about your nonprofit? That has to be clear, because you can't afford to be successful every 3 years shifting and changing. Oh, I'm going to do a program like this, or I'm going to do my program like this. Oh, no, everybody's doing this now, so I'm going to do this. Does that sound like you? Because sometimes people do that and there's not even a reason for it. They just like, oh, I think I'm going to do this now. And if you want your nonprofit to have $1 million budget, to be around for a long time, you want to employ a lot of people, you have to be clear on what you do, why you do it. If you have a set of programs that you provide, you got to be able to say for yourself and defend why your programs are set the way they are, even if they don't look like the way everybody else is doing it. Even if they're not set up the way that somebody else would set them up, you have to know for yourself, this program is set up this way for this reason, and this is why we're doing it, and this is what we are doing. Now, hey y'all, I'm glad y'all saying accept in the chat. Now, you knowing what your programs are needs to be based on research. Obviously, it needs to be based on a clear assessment of what's going on around you, you knowing what your community needs, you doing the research to understanding what works, right? Your own history of knowing what works. How you design your programming and how you design your work has to be based on that, but it can't shift just because the environment around you shifts. You have to, first of all, accept that it will. And it's not always going to be in what you believe is your favor. But let me tell you something. Certain things that you believe are not in your favor on the surface actually are in your favor. Just because something doesn't change in the way you feel like it needs to change for your thing to line up, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not for your good. So that's the first thing I just wanted to process with you all. You got to accept that the environment around you is meant to shift. It's supposed to shift, and it will. And there are some things that on the surface are going to look like the worst thing that could happen to you. But let me tell you something. Some of the worst things that have happened to me 10 years later, I understood looking back why it had to happen that way. Does that make sense, y'all? Y'all with me? Let me know if you can still hear me, especially on Instagram, because I'm so worried about my Wi-Fi. I'm on my what is it? Hotspot on Instagram and on my computer. Right. Okay. So I see your question, Facebook user. I can't see your name for some reason, but I'll keep that in mind um, with that. So put number 2 in the chat, y'all. And we're talking about how to stay financially sustainable despite political changes and whatever major shifts and changes that happen, either for you personally or in your community or for your nonprofit. Just some advice for you as you travel down that path. And if you have questions about financial sustainability, if you have questions about raising money, especially starting, from scratch, please ask those questions. We already have a question about grants. What do I do when I'm at the place where I'm looking for grants? It's a very broad question, but I'll try to answer that once I get through a couple of my points. All right. Deal? Deal. All right. So, number 2, thank y'all for putting number 2 in the chat. You have to be knowledgeable. Knowledgeable. Now, if you want to put that in the chat, you can. I'm not going to hold you accountable for spelling knowledgeable because I know some of us aren't good spellers. But you have to be knowledgeable, right? So, here's the thing. You cannot afford look at Kim coming through. Oh, I got a surprise for Kim at the end. I have a surprise for you, Kim. I've been working on something. Hey, Cheryl. Hey, Kim, APP members. So you can't afford to be ignorant about what's happening around you and what it means for you. Because sometimes when things that are happening around us seem to shift and change everything about us, we kind of go inward. We kind of shut down and say, I don't I don't want to do this, right? Or I don't want to engage. But just because there's something happening around you that's shifting everything and it's uncomfortable, you don't know what's next, you don't know what's happening. That's the moment when you got to lean in. You cannot afford to be ignorant about the things that are happening around you or the things that are coming your way. Now, I talked about this politically because the reality is there are going to be some major policy shifts that are going to impact everyone nationally, but also that may be happening at your state level, at your local level, right? So you have to know what those laws are. Do you understand the laws or the regulation changes that are happening that impact the people that you serve? Because if something is happening to the people that you serve or something is impacting their lives, then best believe that it's going to impact how you serve them. If something's going to impact or change how they receive services or how they're able to adjust or live their lives, then you have to be aware of that and you have to adapt to that. But you can't afford to be in the dark about what's happening to them. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, why aren't people taking our services anymore? Or why am I getting so many more people? Or why am I getting people from this area? Right? There are going to be changes in things that trickle down to your work that you need to be aware of and you need to be mindful of. So here's some suggestions that I would say for you all, especially as nonprofit founders. First of all, do you understand the local law? I'm not even talking about federally. I'm not even talking about at the national level. Do you understand the local laws or ordinances that impact the people that you work with, right? At least on a local level. Some of you all are more national, but especially for you all who are more community based or focused in a geographic area, do you know what those laws are? Do you know the history of those laws? Do you know the people who wrote those laws? Do you know the people who signed on to those laws or supported those laws? Do you understand their reasoning? Do you understand what people who testified, who was for it, who was against it? Do you know that? Because you cannot afford to not be involved in your local political environment. You can't. And I'm not saying as nonprofits, as soon as you say the word politics, sometimes people are like, "Oh, we can't get involved." Right? We're 501c3. We can't endorse people. We can't necessarily endorse legislation. Or we can't lobby for certain legislation. First of all, you can't endorse a candidate. Yes, that's true. You cannot endorse a political candidate, but you can get involved in the political process. You can lobby a little bit, a small percentage, and you better be involved in your local political environment because the changes they're making, the changes they're suggesting, impact you on a personal level and also at the level of your nonprofit. So, first of all, do you understand the laws? Hey, Kamika, that are impacting the work that you're doing and that are impacting the people you serve. But here's the other thing. Do you know the agencies or the people who are responsible for carrying out those laws? Who is responsible for at least doing the regulation, right? Who's implementing those laws? Who's responsible for that? Because then you have to go to your local government agencies and figure out who are the people interpreting these laws? Who are the people putting these laws into place? And how can you work with them, collaborate with them? And a lot of times, how can you get money? I wish I had my I wish I was home so I had my sound effects. Okay. Dang, because I would be like, this is the sound that's going on in my head. Money, right? I'm a little weird, so just bear with me. And it's been a long week, so just bear with me. Thank you, Kamika, for 1999. Kamika's the bomb, y'all. Thriving Kinship in Dallas, Texas. Support her organization because she is the bomb. So, do you understand that by knowing the people who actually have to implement these laws, who have to actually interpret these laws, a lot of times these laws require work to be done, and the government agencies don't have the capacity to do this work. So, a lot of times, what they're going to do is contract out for the work. And you can tell that money is coming by looking at laws and legislation that's being passed. You can absolutely tell by staying up on the laws that are coming down the pike. But if you're not aware of that, if you are not tuned into that, there are opportunities that you will miss. So the first thing I want you to do is understand the local laws in your local community, understand the people who are implementing those laws, right? Like the government agencies, the people who are interpreting that legislation. But I also want you to pay attention to just the legislative folks in your area, your lawmakers in your area, the people who actually write the laws, who pass the laws, because they also have access to money. And when you understand who they are, what they favor, what they push, then you can figure out where your organization fits within that their focus. Am I making sense, y'all? By knowing who your local council people are and knowing who your local council, what they support, where they show up, right? When you show up there or you frame something in the way that matters to them, then you're able to get money and access to opportunities that you wouldn't know about unless you approach them, unless you talk to them. But too many times we're like, oh, I'm not going to get involved in politics. That's not my thing. I'm not supposed to be that involved. I just want to do the work. Let me tell you something. If you want to grow, you have to. You absolutely have to. And this is going to be part of number 3. You have to think beyond what you're comfortable with, and you have to think beyond what you know. And for many people, the political process scares them. For many people, the political process intimidates them. And so they feel like, I can just stay in my bubble here and do my work. But you need to align yourself. Maybe not, if you don't have the same values, you don't necessarily have to align with them in that way. But you need to understand who the people are, who the players are in your local political field, so you can understand where the resources are to support your work, right? Because no matter who's in office, your people need what they need. And if you understand what's being pushed, what's being promoted, then it can put you in a position to be able to get some of that funding and for people to know who you are. All right? If I'm making sense, say, oh yeah, like the Kool-Aid man. Say, oh yeah. And if you need me to explain a little bit more, go ahead and say, explain more, Tiffany. I need you to say more about that. But I just talked about the local level. But what I also need you to understand is it happens. You need to do those same things for your state, understand your state laws, know what state agencies regulate what's going on in your state. But you also need to understand, who the lawmakers are there, but also federally. Who are your state senators? Every one of you should be in your state senator's office at least once in your lifetime. I'm going to say once a year, but at least once in your lifetime. And I'm talking about the US. I know there are some people who are in other countries, and I hope that this translates well to you all. I hope it makes sense. But at least in the political system in the United States, the states have state senators and they represent all of their constituents. And they can't advocate for you or they can't push legislation on your behalf if they don't know who you are and they don't know what you represent. So every single one of you needs to pay a visit to your state senator. Go to their office. They're not always home. A lot of times they're in DC, but when they're on recess, they're home. And you should be talking to them. And you should be having discussions with them about what you're seeing, what's working on the ground, what's not working. They have an obligation. I think what people forget is that these people are public servants. They're voted in democratically. So that means they're supposed to represent the constituents that voted them in. And even if you didn't vote for them, they still represent you, but they can't represent what they don't know, what they don't hear. And you can't sit back and say, you can't, let me just tell you something. You can't be pissed off that something is happening a certain way if you're not a part of the process. I can understand being pissed because you did something, you communicated to them, and they ignored you. That's a different issue. But if you weren't even in the game, you weren't even present, you weren't even at the table, you, how can you afford to be pissed? Or how can you be mad when you didn't even put yourself out there? Aspired heart surgeons to explain more. Awesome. Tell me what you guys need me to explain more so I can go deeper. But I really do suggest that you find out who your state senators are, your state representatives are for the House of Representatives, and you find out where their local office is, and you pay them a visit. You talk to their staffers. You tell them what you have going on. You share the work that you're doing. You share what people are seeing on the ground. What problems are you solving? What are your clients saying to you? What are the things that you're doing that are working that you need more support for, you need resources for? You should be ready to do that. You should be ready and willing. Let me tell you a quick piece of advice for talking to a lawmaker. When you're going to talk to a lawmaker, and I know Dr. Talib, he's on YouTube. He's got a lot to say about this because his nonprofit, The New Hood, he's an APP member. Shout out to APP. He talks about policy changes that impact people in Black communities. Did I get that right? I hope I did. But one thing you need to do when you're talking to a lawmaker is you need to have something for them to do. You need to have a leave behind, which is a document that shares information about who you are, what you do, and you need to give them something to do, right? Like you have to be prepared to give them something, right? Because when you're coming, they're like, well, what can I do for you? What are you asking for? So I don't recommend you go to especially like a state senator or state representative who works with in the House of Representatives. I don't suggest you just go to chat. You go with them with an agenda in mind. You have a suggestion for something they need to change. You have a suggestion or request for access to resources. You need something. And then you need to leave behind information to justify why that policy change is important and why those resources are needed. Because what they're going to do is give that to their staffers, and they're going to use that as a part of their process in developing laws. The one thing I'll say, having worked in the federal policy world, a lot of people just don't understand how laws get made, especially on the national level. People just don't understand. They don't understand what happens in the background. And a lot of times, the staffers are doing the work. It's not the senators, it's not the representatives. The staffers, the people who work for them, the people who are assigned to certain like topics are doing a lot of the background work. So even when you talk and you go see your state senator, a lot of times you're not necessarily talking to them. You're talking to their staffers. They're the people who are actually doing most of the work. So that's what I need you to understand. You need to develop relationships with the staffers, and they need to know who you are because they need to know what's happening back home. That's actually an advantage for them to know what's happening back home, to be able to say, we work with this organization back in here, and this is what they're telling us. They need to understand that you are actually helping them as they help you. So that was a big, I could probably do a whole live on just this topic here. But I need you to be politically informed as nonprofit founders, because the more that you're connected, the more likely you're going to stay around. The more that you know how to operate and move around like the political world, understand what's happening around you, understand and assess, okay, if this policy change happens in our local community, then more than likely we're going to be hit this way, or this is going to impact us this way. All right, so how do we need to change? How do we need to adjust? Who do we need to partner with? That kind of thinking requires more than just, oh, I just want to help people. As a nonprofit founder, you are a visionary. I tell you guys that all the time. You are a visionary. It's your job to see the long term vision. It's your job to look back and see what's coming down the pike and adjust and prepare. That's what leaders do. So you have to position yourself to make the best decision by being knowledgeable. All right. So I got some comments on YouTube. Anyone can call the state. Cheryl says this: anyone can call the state senator's office and schedule an appointment to see them. You may see the chief of staff and the person who's in charge of constituent services if the senator is not available. That's right. A lot of times you may not see them, but they don't do the work anyway. I'm gonna stop being a little shady, but it's true. Their staffers do a lot of the work. So if you know their staffers, then you're in good. Someone says, make sure your paperwork is right and make sure there's a need for our community. Yes. Listen to your clients and advocate for them. Kamika said that. Absolutely. You are the mouthpiece for the people you serve, because they're not maybe positioned to be able to do that themselves. They may not be positioned or even have the capacity mentally, physically, whatever, to be able to be in a space where they can go talk to a lawmaker, to be able to create a persuasive argument to their lawmaker. But you can, because you see the work at a bigger level. You work at a bigger level and you can talk about things that you're seeing, right? I was thinking about, I'm going to use this example, then I'm going to move on. Hey, Darby, I was thinking about some work I was doing in North Carolina years ago. And the reason why I was thinking about it is I'm actually in North Carolina right now in a hospital. So I was thinking about the health care system, particularly like the mental health system. And there were some laws being proposed like 10 years ago now that impacted how the mental health system worked. So um, it had an impact on who could access services, right? And it severely limited who could access mental health services. And I work in the child welfare field. And so a lot of people who get their children taken away or are struggling with parenting have mental health needs. And there are a lot of children who are in foster care who have mental health needs because they've been traumatized either by the abuse and neglect that they experienced, or they're traumatized by not being with their parents and being removed from their parents. And so people knew then that with that law changing, that it would severely impact those systems. Like not having enough mental health resources will severely impact kids in foster care. So people organized and talked about and talked to their state senators and talked to foundations about, hey, the state is making this change in law and we may not be able to change, or impact that this happens, but we can advocate for our clients and say, hey, foundation, we need more support for this program because the state's not going to be able to do it anymore. Am I making sense? So you have to be able to assess and then advocate for yourself and for your clients. You're advocating for yourself because you're advocating for funding, and you're making the case to funders and saying, hey, the state ain't doing this, but we can, and here's how much it'll cost. Pay us, right? Or you can advocate to the state. So this state law passed, and we know that y'all are going to get hit. Y'all going to have to provide a service that you don't have the capacity to do. Well, you can contract out for us and we can do it for a cheaper cost, right? And we can become a contractor for your services. There are so many different ways that you can use your knowledge to be able to advocate for yourself to get funding. Because in the end, it's not about getting paid. Let's be clear. I don't want anybody to be confused about why I'm saying this. I'm not saying this so you can get paid. I'm saying this is because you need financial resources to serve your people. You need money to serve your people. You can't keep surviving off your own pockets. You can't keep surviving off of your paycheck. That's not sustainable, and that's not actually fair. It's the It's the state's responsibility and the government's responsibility to care for its citizens. And if they're not going to do it directly, then they should at least pay for it. That's just my stance. Some people don't agree, but that's my stance. So you can, by doing that, you can advocate and say, if y'all aren't going to do it, we can, but you need to pay us this to make that happen. Okay. All right. So that was a lot, but I really do hope that made sense for y'all. Um, number three, put number three in the chat. Put number three in the chat. So I'm talking about how to be financially sustainable when political changes happen. And it's because of the results of the election in the United States, but not just that. Changes happen all the time. And so I wanted to give advice for, how to stay on your path when you want to be sustainable. Number three is all about community. And, I talk a lot about relationship building and fundraising. I do. And when you are trying to raise money, especially when you're starting from the very beginning, it's really important for you to dig into who you know. Who are your family? Who are your friends? Who are your associates? Who are your professional contacts? Everybody you know. It's really important for you to cash in on those relationships, basically, and ask them to support you. Ask them to believe in your mission. Ask them to support somebody else in need. And you can help facilitate and make that happen for them by them donating money to your organization. But that runs out. There's only so many people you're going to be able to ask and ask again before you have to start going beyond your circle. And so your sense of community, what you believe is your community, probably right now is too limited. And y'all not going to like this part, but I'm going to push you because I got to push myself. All right. Hey, Miss I Woke Up Winning. Thank you for watching me. So your idea and your sense of what your community is what makes you feel safe, right? It's people you know. It's things you can control. It's things that make you don't push you off your game, right? Because if you talk to people that you know, or if you're in environments that you're comfortable with, or you feel like you can handle it, then you're limiting yourself and you're creating a box for yourself. There are rooms that you have yet to enter that are going to scare the crap out of you. That there are people that you need to talk to at higher levels, like government officials or foundation people or prominent people in your area who need to be a part of your organization's community that you don't feel like are your community right now. Am I making sense? I'm basically saying you got to expand your network in ways that aren't comfortable for you. So there are certain people you may align yourself with in your own personal network, in your own personal sense of community, that you're like, these are my people. But just understand that when it comes to your nonprofit's people may not look like who you want to work with. They may not look like who you want to work with, or they may not be people you're comfortable with, right? Or they may be people who are unexpected. Now, let me give a little caveat because I am talking a little abstract. I am not suggesting that you work with people that are not in alignment with your values. If there are people that you don't want money from because you don't agree with whatever they do, it could be on whatever political side you're on, then I am not suggesting you just go get money from those people just because they have money. You have to know where your line is and what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. And for everybody, that's different. But what I am saying is that you're going to have to talk to some people who have access to money that you're not used to talking to, that you don't understand, that may live life different than you, may make decisions differently than you, that are weird and just you're like, I don't get it. Because they're not who you're used to, but you have to talk to them, right? There are people you're going to be exposed to who you've never been exposed to before that may actually surprise you, that may actually agree with you in ways that you didn't realize they agreed with you. And if you're staying in a box and saying, well, I don't want to talk to those people because Either I'm not good enough to talk to those people, or they're not going to understand me, or they're not going to want to work with me based on my history or how I look. If you use that as your excuse, then you're not going to grow. I'm just going to say that. You're not going to grow. There are some people, yes, who are going to judge you based on your experience, based on what you look like, based on who you are. Who cares? There are some people you have who, when they first meet you, are not going to understand you. They're not going to understand why you do what you do, and they're not necessarily going to agree with everything that you do. Who cares? Talk to them anyway. Talk to them anyway. Because what matters more is your mission, and that people understand your mission and what you're trying to do, right? So I just want you to know that you're not going to grow talking to the people who you feel comfortable with. You're not. Yes, there's a line. There's certain people you want to work with them. You don't have to. They're not in alignment with your values. Of course, yes. Don't work with people who just I don't even know how to say it. I don't know how to say it better than if their values strongly counter your organization's values, because this is about your organization, it's not about you. Then you don't have to work with them. But there are certain people, certain rooms um, that you're going to be completely uncomfortable in. You're going to feel like you maybe don't deserve to be in that room, or you feel like, I don't know what to say. You want to go into a place, you want to go to a meeting, you're like, I don't know what to say. Go anyway. I don't do this. I don't wear suits and I don't like being stuffy. I like being myself. Go anyway. Be yourself, but go anyway. Now is not the time to shortchange yourself. Now is not the time, before you even have an interaction with somebody, to already discount that conversation or already say, well, they're not going to want to work with me, or they're not going to understand me, or they're not going to do this. You cannot dictate what somebody will do. You are not God. You cannot assume what somebody will and won't do for you. And too many times I see people just not pursue things because they create narratives and stories in their head about what will or what won't. Mm-mm. I strongly believe you got to be yourself. And there are some people who are not going to understand you. Go anyway. Because those are the kinds of stances, those are the kind of approaches that make you sustainable. Because when you try to bend and be somebody else, that doesn't last. So be yourself, know who you are, know your mission, stay focused, but meet new people. Meet people who think differently than you, eat differently than you. You know, I don't like going to no fancy restaurants eating small plates. I don't like doing networking lunches or let's meet for coffee and let's chat. I hate that. I'm not a talker. I've been talking my head off right now. But in social settings, I'm not a talker. I don't like small talk. But you need to do that. You got to meet people. You got to come out completely out of your comfort zone to do things that aren't necessarily normal for you, because a lot of times what's normal for you is just code for your comfort. It's just code for I want to be safe. But being safe doesn't get you where you're trying to go. All right. Go anyway. That's my takeaway point. Go anyway. You're welcome, Inspired Heart Surgeon. All right. So let's recap. Y'all ready to recap? Nelson said, thank you for inspiring me. Of course. Of course, of course. That is what I love to do. All right, so I'm gonna recap, and you tell me. I want you to talk to me. You tell me what you're gonna take away from this live and what you're gonna do, okay? Because it's not about just sitting here listening. It's actually about making a change. And if you heard something that you liked, or something that you want to implement, make sure you like this video. Make sure you tag somebody in it if you're on Facebook or Instagram, and make sure you share with somebody who needs this information. So, first recap. Accept. This is the first thing we talked about, how to be financially sustainable, even with their political changes and shifts. First of all, accept that things are going to shift, that they have to shift, right? and stay true to who you are, know your mission, know your programming, and know why you need it, because that doesn't change. Even though the environment around you doesn't change, what you're meant to do and what your mission is shouldn't change just because of that. So stay true to yourself, but accept that things have to change and things will change around you, and that's okay. Number two, be knowledgeable. Be knowledgeable about the laws that are happening at your local level, state, federal level. Things are about to shift dramatically. And instead of like saying, oh God, say, okay, what's happening and how is that going to impact us? How do we move as a result? It's going to be okay, right? But you have to know, you cannot be ignorant about that. You have to be aware. So know the laws, know the lawmakers, and know the people who are implementing the laws. Know the people at the government agencies who are supposed to implement these laws. Know everybody. They're your allies, whether you realize it or not. And then number three, focus on building your community, but expanding it beyond who you know and who you're comfortable with. That's the only way you're going to grow. The only way you're going to grow. All right. So let me answer some questions because there were some questions. I see two questions. Somebody said something very, very early on. What do I do when I'm at the place where I'm looking for grants? That's a very general question. So I'm gonna assume that you mean where do you go? How do you find grants? So my best piece of advice is start local. The easier grants are the local regional grants with your banks, with your grocery stores. Talk to your community foundation, talk to people who are in your local area. Look at other organizations in your area that are similar to you. They do similar work or similar in size, and see who funds them and follow the money. So you can start there. You also need to practice writing grants. You got to get in the practice of creating a persuasive argument because that's basically what a grant proposal is. You're trying to persuade somebody to fund you. So you got to get in the practice of writing in that way of making the case for your work. So find a grant and write it and get comfortable with it. The only way you get better at writing grants is by writing grants. Like I can't tell you, I can give you the basics and how to write, but you have to get comfortable and know how to make an argument for your work. And you are the best person at doing that because you are the founder. Um, there was another question. Am I having a challenge soon? I probably won't have another challenge until the spring. But it'll probably be, I don't know which one it'll be. I might do the 1K launch challenge, which Cheryl just won last week. Whoop whoop for Cheryl. Gap Coalition of Chester County. She won $500 for raising the most money. She raised a little over $8,000 from her 30-day campaign. What? Yes. And Cheryl is also an APP member. So if you're interested in getting support, accountability, and help from me for your fundraising, make sure you join APP. It's open to the end of the month. I mean, end of the year. I put the link in the chat for y'all. But my next challenge might be the 1K launch challenge or the full-time founder challenge to help people become full-time their nonprofit. See any other questions? I own an LLC and you're teaching me so much, Tiffany. I'm glad. I'm thinking about transitioning to talking about starting a business too. I talk a lot about nonprofit startup, but I think I'm going to transition to also talking about just business startup because I've owned several businesses and have failed in several businesses. So I would love to tell those stories. All right. So people are committing to doing some things. Let's talk about it. Meeting new people is great experience. Kim says, I will get to know lawmakers. Aspired Heart Surgeon said, I'm going to listen to the population I serve and begin studying the laws in my community. I'm talking to the churches in my community and conducting outreach. Love it. Kamika said, I enjoy advocating. Go anyway. Talk to your lawmakers. Yes, yes, yes. Aspired Heart Surgeon said, subscribe to your state DHHS. I agree with that. Talk to them, meet those people, see what kind of work they're doing. Black Youth Jobs Toronto said, review grant directory from local library. That's great advice. Absolutely. A lot of your local libraries have access to the foundation directory online. At least one in your state, at least in the US, has access to it. So do that. All right. You inspired me to start my agency, but I had to start small. Hey, as long as you started, that's my thing. I just love to support people um, starting. That's my thing, man. I just love it. Okay, I see a question on Instagram. Is it better to start out with an LLC until it's profitable before fully transitioning into nonprofit since it takes time to wait on grants? So I'll just say this. You can't in most states is you can't just transition from an LLC to nonprofit. Most nonprofits are not LLCs. There's only a certain kind of LLC that can be a nonprofit. I don't know your specific situation. I'm only talking generally, so I'm just going to say generally LLCs are not nonprofits. But so it's separate. And so I do think though that if you are trying to um, create a living off your nonprofit, like you want to be employed by your nonprofit, then it makes a lot of sense to have another stream of income before you fully go into your nonprofit. Yes, I agree that you should be making money a different way before you pursue your nonprofit because there are just a lot of more hurdles you got to work through and a lot more restrictions to making money. Um, that you can't just make unilateral decisions that you could make with a business. So it's easier, kind of quicker to make money with just a regular for-profit business. So I think if it were me, I would do the LLC route first and then pursue a nonprofit, or do it at the same time. Just not go full time to your nonprofit until you have another income source. Okay. All right. I think that's everything. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, somebody needs this information, so share it with them. Like this video; it helps me with my engagement on social media. And thank you so much for supporting Boss on a Budget, y'all. This has been a whopper of a year. Let me just say that. It's been a whopper. It's been a lot. But one thing I really do prioritize for everybody is rest. Rest. Kim just put it through. Thank you. Get some sleep. Rest. More than anything, rest. That's my lesson that I've learned this year that I'm trying to do. So this is what I'm going to do at the end of my live. Okay. This is for you, Kim. My name, dang, I'm gonna mess it up. My name is, and I'm learning sign language, and I just wanted to show Kim I know how to sign my name. I'll do it one more time. See, A, Y. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. Have an awesome week, and I'll see you next Sunday.